This is, to my knowledge, one of the first times that KLAS has reached out to the investment community. Historically, our background is not doing things such as this. We are very passionate about measuring the healthcare IT industry, giving good information out to hospitals, and giving good feedback to vendors to help them in their improvement efforts. We have known for a long time that we have a really good perspective around how well these different healthcare IT vendors are performing and what that could mean for them down the road. We've never really seriously looked at reaching out to the investment community with this information. So as we do this today, this is sort of us dipping our toe in the water. If this is helpful, then great. We can keep working down that road. If not, we appreciate your participation, and thanks for working with us and tuning in today. So I'm Taylor Davis. I head our analysis division here at KLAS. First, I just want to jump in real quick with a little bit about our group. So I lead up the Performance Insight group. What we do quite a bit of is working with vendors and providers face-to-face and giving them good information about what's going on in the industry. So when we go do a Performance Insight session, typically we are breaking out our data in a whole bunch of different ways, and are small hospitals more frustrated or more happy than the large hospitals? What are the HCAHPS scores for these different customers, etc.? We do some trending analysis. We look at outliers quite a bit. So what's happening when everything breaks down and the wheels really come off the bus? We get verbatim comments from a lot of customers that we look through there. And one thing that we're starting to do is some correlation analysis with the KLAS Fingerprint. We do some higher level modeling. Depending on the situation, it only has so much usefulness. And anyone familiar, I have a statistical background, anyone familiar with customer satisfaction feedback, correlation analysis is oftentimes some of the most helpful type of analysis to do on this type of data, and that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. This is a slide that we share with vendors as we meet with them, just to say, hey, we're going to give the most actionable feedback, the clearest feedback that we can to you. In a sense, today, that's what we're saying to you as the investment community. The clarity, that's what we do best, is cutting through the marketing haze that's out there in the industry and talking about who's really doing what. We're happy to give you and how well are they doing it, and what are, when the rubber hits the road, what do your customers think of you? I want to talk about real quick about it was a Harvard business case paper, and it came out in 2001, written by Fred Reichelt. The Net Promoter, everyone's heard of Net Promoter, not only just the healthcare IT industry, healthcare technology industry, but Net Promoter really moved through the corporate world, and for many companies is the standard by which they measure customer satisfaction. What is the Net Promoter? It's essentially a simple way of measuring overall how many promoters do you have in your customer base and how many detractors do you have, and what is the net of all of that? Do you have more people out there speaking good about what's going on with your product than speaking ill? And if you have a lot more customers talking positively about what they're receiving from you, then it would stand to reason that your product is going to be, by word of mouth, is going to be going in a good direction as far as sales, customer retention, etc. KLAS does do some Net Promoter-ish measurements. We call it the evangelism score. We use a 9-point scale instead of 11-point scale. But just for anybody who's not familiar with Net Promoter, and I assume that probably is not anybody here on the phone, but that's all right. Anybody who's not familiar with Net Promoter, here's just a quick explanation. The idea is that you ask customers on a scale, how likely are you to recommend this product and service? And you take those customers who rate very high, and in this case for the evangelism score, it's half of those who rate an 8 and all of those who rate a 9. You have a group who are just kind of wishy-washy in the middle, those who are rating a 7. And then you have those customers who are real detractors, who are really frustrated, those who are rating a 6 or below, and who are likely out there actually speaking ill about your product and fairly frustrated. The evangelism score, Net Promoter score, whatever you want to call it, is essentially taking these groups, putting them together, and then subtracting the percentage of the evangelists, the naysayers from the evangelists. So a product like this would have a Net Promoter Score of 35, and 35, and a fairly positive Net Promoter Score. Today we want to talk, Net Promoter is good. I think that it's a very good, there's some critiques out there, but I think that part of the reason why Net Promoter is moved through so many industries is that it just makes a lot of sense. Yes, if I can get an idea of how many customers are there out there, it's a fairly efficient way of measuring what does my customer base think of me. We want to take this, peel the onion back and take another level of depth into looking at how does customer satisfaction data map to success in sales and in retention. And just this linkage between customer satisfaction, which is what we measure at KLAS, probably more than anything else. We do a lot of adoption measurement also, but we spend a lot of time measuring how satisfied are customers. What is the linkage between customer satisfaction and new sales? And just to pause on that real quick, a satisfied customer base does not always mean good sales and good retention. We have seen that again and again. So just the fact that a lot of your customers are happy, they still could be leaving for other strategic reasons. And what are those? How can you understand that from the customer satisfaction feedback? How can you differentiate between the highly satisfied customer base, maybe like an Epic, where that high satisfaction is driving a tremendous number of new sales and energy in the marketplace? Compare that to maybe a vendor like USA, Unbiased Systems Architecture, high KLAS scores for a long time, private company, small company, but at the same time, there is not very much energy there with their product, and they're nowhere near the energy levels of an Epic, despite having a very satisfied customer base. So what's the difference between two of those type of products? So Net Promoter is all about the if. Would you recommend? The KLAS Fingerprint, which we're talking about today, is all about the why. Why would you recommend? And we would put forward that the why matters just as much as the if. Let me just run through a quick example. My wife and myself, our favorite date is going and finding a new restaurant that we've never been to before and eating things that we've never eaten before. So we are always on the lookout for recommendations about restaurants. And a few weeks ago, we went to one that was just absolutely horrible. The food tasted just absolutely horrible. And actually, as I think back about that recommendation, it was recommended that we go to this restaurant by a few different people. And actually, as I think back about it, none of them mentioned the food. Almost all of them mentioned the atmosphere in the restaurant. And to tell you the truth, as I think about it, I care more about the food than I care about the atmosphere. I am not a restaurant atmosphere person. And it's made me a little bit more discerning as I get recommendations from folks. Okay, are you recommending to me that I go here because of the food or for something else? Because if it's a date for me and my wife, it's got to be the food. Sometimes we love some of those freeway hole in the walls, with just absolutely terrific food. So as you get recommendations from folks about a restaurant, think about what really matters to you and what will really get you to go to a restaurant rather compared to some of those things that maybe wouldn't. Now, there are definitely times if our pocketbook is a little bit tight that the recommendation of, hey, that's a really cheap restaurant, would get us out and maybe have us looking at a restaurant. But at the end of the day, what really matters, even though we might be getting a number of recommendations because we're always asking around, for us, the food is what really matters. Anyway, bringing that over to talking about the why, let me just explain how this maps to the healthcare IT market. I want to talk about Kronos Workforce Scheduler. So we took one market segment that we watched. KLAS watches about 120 different market segments. We do 30,000 plus surveys a year. But let's just take a small subset and let's look at what is the evangelism score for the staff scheduling market. If you look here, you can see that there's a couple companies, there's 3 companies that have the highest evangelism scores. Clairvia and McKesson Ansas are rated the very highest. Both of these companies work very hard on their service offerings. So there's a lot of service here. And that's part of the reason why customers say, yeah, I'd absolutely recommend this vendor. And then at the bottom of the pack, as far as the evangelism score, is Kronos Workforce Scheduler and API. I highlighted Kronos, but the truth is that I'm really looking at Kronos and API. So lower evangelism scores. What's interesting is that we track who providers are looking at online and how are those trends and some of that type of information. As we look at who customers are looking at, they're not looking at Clairvia very much. They are looking at McKesson Ansas a good amount, and part of that is just that McKesson Ansas has a huge customer base, and so we'd expect to see a lot more customers looking at McKesson Ansas. So the fact that McKesson Ansas is there is not too surprising. But if we even cut this down, it's our feeling as we cut this down and start taking out just current customers that it's API and Kronos who are getting the most market looks. This is not a scientific sample, but it's not too bad either. If we look at the organizations that we're coming across and who has new go-lives, who has new wins, API and Kronos are killing it out there. To tell you the truth, as we measure this space, we speak to lots of customers about who are you planning on buying, and I just know that if I pick up the phone with a CNO and that CNO says, hey, we're looking at buying a staff scheduling system, I just know in my gut, having gone through this a good number of times, that I'm going to hear Kronos and I'm going to hear API, and I likely will not hear anyone else. So our gut in this market is that as far as new sales and new energy, while McKesson has this huge customer base, API and Kronos are really the 2 vendors that are driving forward with a lot of sales, a lot of energy. Well, that seems a little bit contradictory, right? Because they had the lowest evangelism scores. So they had the lowest net promoter rate within their customer bases, and still they're driving forward at an incredible rate. Maybe there's a why behind this. Maybe there's a why that really drives customers to look at these 2 vendors. The whole idea of the customer fingerprint class measures. KLAS asks 25 standard questions to those who are on the phone. 19 of those questions are rating questions, and one of those questions is the customer overall satisfaction. How you get the KLAS customer fingerprint is that you just look at the ratings from high to low, and so here you can see supports integration goals. These are just small abbreviations of what the question actually is, but supports integration goals is the highest rated question that the 40 or so customers for Kronos that are rating Kronos rated, whereas quality of implementation is the lowest. So we take those from high to low, and then we correlate each of these, I would call them detail questions: quality of training, quality of implementation, quality of phone support. We look at what is the correlation between each of these questions and the customer overall satisfaction. And just to pause for a minute, I know that a lot of the folks who are on the phone you understand data and correlation, but I just want to make sure that we're all up on the same page. The whole idea behind correlation is when X happens, does Y usually happen also? And so we use correlation all the time. I notice that every single time that I see in my rearview mirror or on the freeway one of those souped-up Subarus, that I'm going to have somebody who's going to cut me off. So there's a correlation there between those souped-up Subarus and somebody who cuts me off. We use correlation in our human mind all the time without thinking about it. Here, we're just using it and saying, if a customer is frustrated about this question, are they usually frustrated overall? And if they're happy with this question, are they usually happy overall? Does this question really indicate what the customer satisfaction is overall? That's all correlation is. So a highly correlated indicator would indicate that that's really pretty closely linked with customer satisfaction. Anyway, we can bring the customer ratings over, and we can map them, the correlation versus the overall scores, kind of in this grid. Now, here's just an important point. We map a grid out here, but this is all relative to itself. What do I mean by that? The y-axis and the x-axis to a point change for every customer fingerprint. For instance, Epic Ambulatory EMR, one of the highest rated products that KLAS measures, could have a fingerprint that looks exactly like this, except for that the y-axis is just a lot higher. Whereas some lower rated products could have the very same exact fingerprint, except for that there's a change on the y-axis and or the x-axis. And that actually makes the fingerprint a little bit tricky to understand and to get your hands around. And hopefully today brings some clarity around, okay, so it's all relative to myself, but what does that bring me? At the end of the day, what we're looking for is, great, customers rate this product high or low, but the fingerprint essentially is saying, what do they like about this product and what do they not like about this product? And so for instance, with Kronos, you can see here the questions that are more highly correlated with the customer satisfaction are to the right. These are the questions essentially that customers care a lot about. And those that are not quite as important are to the left. So for instance, with Kronos, we have supports integration goals. The integration is very important to customers. And to tell you the truth, as we speak to customers who are buying this product, they say, yeah, it is critical to me that my scheduling system be strongly integrated or interfaced to my time and attendance product, which is something that only Kronos and API really have in this market. And so that integration is very important to customers, and in this case, it's rated very high. So you can see some obvious strengths that that Kronos brings in their customer eyes that Kronos has. There's also very few significant weaknesses. Quality of implementation could be a little bit better. It's not as important as a lot of these other areas, such as money's worth or integration, but it is somewhat important, and it's kind of a weaker area relative to the other questions for Kronos. What you're looking for is, just first off, a vendor who has a lot of great strengths and very few key weaknesses would likely be a vendor where customers, even if they're giving kind of a moderate overall satisfaction score, where they're pretty pleased overall, and likely a little bit more loyal. Let me just walk through some of the other fingerprints, and hopefully to give you a feeling for this. Let's just talk about some of the other customers in this space. And here are the 4 other key players in this space. As I said, and I just want to reiterate, the fingerprint can be a little bit tricky to get your hands around. But once you sort of understand how to read this, sort of like reading an actual fingerprint, there's a lot of information here, and there's a lot that you can do with it. So if we look at Concero's fingerprint, why would you buy Concero? Well, there's good phone support, but that's kind of not even as important to customers. Well, it's a pretty stable product, right? And why would you not buy it? Well, they're not really developing new technology. The question is for delivery of new technology, the actual long question that we ask the customers is, rate your satisfaction with how well this vendor delivers new technology that meets your needs. So we're talking about meeting tomorrow's needs, and as far as developing for tomorrow's needs, in customers' minds, that's a weakness that Concero has. And even though there's high class ratings here, that being a weakness, as we'll talk about, makes this product less attractive to future customers. Clairvia. Why would you buy Clairvia? Well, probably the biggest reason is that it's well priced, and we hear that a lot from customers who are going down the Clairvia route of, hey, we don't have the money for a Kronos or an API, and so this is what we're going for. If we look at McKesson and Sauce, we don't really see a lot of strong strengths that customers really care about. This highlights, in part, some of the higher turnover that we've seen with this product, despite high customer satisfaction, and the lower sales that we've seen with this product. Again, delivery of new technology is in that bottom right-hand quadrant. And then the API fingerprint, again, supports integration goals is very important, and delivery of new technology is also rated quite high, and proactive service. So there's some real good reasons why customers are pretty pleased with the API, and this would be a very healthy fingerprint right here. At the end of the day, we can look at these fingerprints because KLAS measures over 900 different products. And so can we look at these fingerprints and say, is there a fingerprint that's more likely to indicate success, even no matter what the KLAS score is, whether it's high or low? As we look at this, for instance, we'll take those products. We can take those products that we see a lot of new sales for, you can see what does that fingerprint look like. One question I would ask you to keep an eye on would be delivery of new technology. That's up there in that top right-hand quadrant, important to customers in a relative strength. Supports integration goals is also rated high, although on average maybe not quite as important to customers. Low sales products, where we're not seeing very many new sales, look at where delivery of new technology is. It's rated it's one of the lowest rated questions for this group of customers, and fairly important still. Supports integration goals, again, not rated as high. So what fingerprint really is, what are the characteristics of a really successful fingerprint? There's a lot more information here. Each of these questions tells us something about the product, but there's 3 questions that as a beginner of learning how to look at the fingerprint and to understand what it's saying, there's 3 questions that we'd encourage you to keep an eye on. Those are executive involvement, supports integration goals, and delivery of new technology. We're going to talk about each one of these briefly and why are they important. Let me say it this way. Delivery of new technology, probably the question that in terms of measuring product success that we're watching here at KLAS more than almost anything else. Are you developing to meet tomorrow's needs? If you're doing it and it's very pertinent and it's important to customers, that's in your top right-hand quadrant. We see 72% higher sales the following year. If delivery of new technology is in your upper right-hand quadrant, we see 57% lower turnover the following year. Supports integration goals. Whether that's in the top left quadrant or the top right quadrant, it can be a focus for customers, it can be less of a focus for customers, but it just needs to be there. You need to have integration. And you can see the numbers here, higher sales and lower turnover. Just so you know, all of these values that are starred are very statistically significant. And then executive involvement, that's actually a question where you don't want it to be a focus. You want a behind-the-scenes relationship, and we'll talk about what that means, but you want executive involvement to be in the upper left-hand quadrant, and if it is up there, then we see much lower turnover. The integration findings, as far as these 3 questions go, the integration will be important. It's kind of a no-brainer. We see again and again, as KLAS watches a lot of decisions in the market, again and again we see products with great functionality lose out to products with just decent but integrated functionality. And we can give hundreds of examples of where we've seen that in the industry, and it just plays out again and again. The integration, customers are willing to give up 20-30% of their functionality and in possibly even service in order to get integration and to have everything tied together. One of the other findings that we see is that innovation drives sales. So the percentage of products that are seeing really, really high sales that KLAS is measuring, a significant share of those are innovator products. And vice versa. If you are an innovator, we see a much higher probability that you're going to see high sales, and a much higher probability that you're not going to be down there in the category of no sales that KLAS is measuring right now. Not saying that there aren't any sales out there, but just that not that KLAS is coming across. I would liken delivery of new technology in that question to customer expectations. Customers have an expectation today when they're buying a technology product that they're not going to get off in the same place where they got on. So a quick analogy. There was a JetBlue flight in 2007. I think it hit the news, and some of you may have heard about this. It was taking off from JFK. It was flying down to Mexico City. And rather than taking off, it got stalled because of weather on the tarmac, and sat there for 8 hours. Customers, when they got off the plane, started filing lawsuits against JetBlue, were very angry. And the reason why they were so angry was not because they sat for 8 hours on the plane. A short delay associated with the flight could easily put customers at 8 hours, and they would have been okay with that. The reason why they were so angry is because they got off in the same airport that they got on after sitting there for 8 hours. We see the very same thing with healthcare technology. Customers are buying because of expectations that this product will continue to meet tomorrow's competitive needs in the industry. And those products that are positioned well to meet tomorrow's needs are the products that are really attractive to customers. What does that mean for a vendor? We look at those products that have delivery of new technology in the top right-hand quadrant, and we notice a common theme. There's a grand vision of where this product is going. There's good communication to the customer base, and there's visible progress moving the product forward. Let me just give a couple examples here. McKesson's Paragon product. 12 years ago, this was the lowest product the class measured. It almost set new records for how angry customers were when we got on the phone with them. The product itself was in a state of disarray. Functionally, it was very poor. There was a lot of code quality issues with it. The customer base was leaving very quickly. This product essentially went underground, underwent a lot of development over the past about decade or so, and now today is a very attractive product, one of the highest selling products in the community EMR space. And one of the things that customers say again and again about this product is they are developing to meet our needs. And their development sometimes is so fast we have a hard time keeping up with it, but what a great problem to have. And a grand vision, you bet. There's a great vision of McKesson Paragon being a lower price solution that has all the functionality that we need, 80% of the functionality that the big systems have, all the functionality that we need built on Microsoft technology. Is there visible progress? You bet there is. Is there good communication? Absolutely. So there's a lot of good things that this product has going for it, and we can look at the Fingerprint and say, yeah, this is a product that's moving in a very successful direction, one that we would expect to keep selling for the foreseeable future, and to continue to hold on to customers. We see very few customers, if almost any, leaving McKesson Paragon. eClinical Works. This is a product that's turned some heads in the industry. 7 years ago, if we talked about the main players in the ambulatory EMR space, eClinical Works would not even really be on the list. They'd be somewhere with an asterisk down below. And today, they're very much there. What makes eClinical Works very attractive to customers? One of the main things that we see is the development that's going on with that product. To give you an idea, what's the grand vision? The grand vision is that this is a product that will be the most easy to use out of the box for physicians. What's been the latest development that we've seen? Well, version 9.5 has had some good, has this new dashboard where customers can see all of the meaningful use criteria and how well they're meeting it. Nobody else has that dashboard. That's eClinical Works. They are developing, they're very much kind of the thought leader, development leaders in many aspects of the ambulatory EMR. And we watch a number of their competitors continue to catch up with them. In customer ratings, we can see that, and we can see that this is critical. And delivery of new technology has been in their top right quadrant for a long time and continues to be so. Despite a lot of issues that they have with service, etc., the fact that this is such a strength continues to make them very relevant in a good number of deals out there. Anyway, we're not seeing any questions coming across. If you have any, feel free to share them. We're happy to connect with you afterwards also. One of the other questions that we talked about was executive relationships. Now, relationships and service, as far as class modeling and our looking at the data goes, don't necessarily generally drive new sales. There is a certain level of service over a long period of time of just brand name reliability, of wow, sort of epicness or Greenway, wow, these guys are always reliable, that we think makes, over a long run, makes a product very attractive. But in the short run, sales and relationship relationship do little to drive service and relationship do little to drive new sales. However, they do a lot to hold on to your customer base. This is extremely pertinent in the healthcare technology industry because there are only so many customers out there. In the hospital space, it is small town USA. There are only a few thousand buying entities who will actually buy your product. And if you go through customers too quickly, you will find yourself not being able to sell to anyone. In many ways, McKesson Horizon has been this way. There's some other difficulties that they had. But for a long time, KLAS talked about McKesson Horizon as being the revolving door. There's a lot of customers coming in, but there's a lot of customers coming out, and they're not holding on to customers. Anyway, we see that relationships do a lot to hold on to customers. In essence, you want executive involvement to be in the top left-hand quadrant. You don't want the relationship with the vendor to be a focus. Why is that? We notice that when it's a focus, when executive involvement is in the top right-hand quadrant, that means that there's a lot of problems going on. So it's a focus for me because I'm meeting with our executives constantly because things are not working for me. That's not a healthy fingerprint. But when there's a high level of relationship of executive touch, and it's over on the top left-hand quadrant, that means the customers are saying, well, it's almost more than I need, but yeah, they're always here. They're always talking to me. They're always communicating with me. And we see those vendors doing a much better job holding on to their customers. A good example of a vendor who has flipped in executive involvement. 5 years ago, if you had told me that Cerner would be where they are today, I think I might have laughed you out of the room. And that's just me personally, not KLAS, just me personally. But we talked to so many customers who were so frustrated in dealing with Cerner. Actually, let me give an example. This was an example that I heard several years ago. Neil Patterson comes on site to one of his biggest customers, and hears, actually it wasn't just Neil, it was the executive team. They hear a whole bunch of frustrations from the CNO, from the CMIO, from the CMO, and one of their frustrations, Cerner's feedback is, that is not a big deal. We can fix that for you in a couple weeks. We hop on the phone with them a year later and they say, we are still livid because their top management came out here and told us, no problem, that can be fixed in a couple weeks. And here we are a year out and that problem is still not fixed. That was somewhat par for the course for Cerner customers. Good technology, but very frustrating to work with Cerner. That has changed over the past 5 years. And Cerner has put a lot of work into their relationship. And as you can see here, for the Cerner Millennium, you can see executive involvement in that top left-hand quadrant. There's a formal process that customers are going through. These feedback sessions, Cerner is doing a great job of taking that feedback and moving on it. This is really driving forward the customer satisfaction scores. But what is it also doing? It's holding on to customers. 4 years ago, Cerner was somewhat a revolving door also. They were losing a lot of customers to Epic. Today, Epic has gotten even stronger, a stronger competitor, but Cerner is holding on to even more of its customers, a higher percentage of its customers. And there are a number of Cerner customers who would have the money to move to Epic, they could move to Epic, but they're happy with Cerner. And a lot of the reason why they're happy is the relationship. Anyway, a good example of a vendor who's really gotten down that relationship and seeing that pay dividends as far as holding on to their customers. Another thing that the relationship does, just a side note, is while Cerner's not seeing a huge number of net new customers, especially on the large side of the market, they are seeing that with the community space. You're seeing Cerner's reported revenues continue to grow. A large part of that is that as that relationship grows, they're able to to assume a larger slice of business within each customer, and so they grow within each customer. They're doing more. They're expanding. They're doing full IT outsourcing. They're offering a lot of services, which is allowing them to continue to grow and to improve. So this relationship not only holds on to customers, but we see it being able to it lets customers hand more things off to the technology vendor and be more pertinent within their organization. The bottom line, there's a couple of things that we can share. The bottom line is that if you walk away from anything, with anything from this presentation, please understand that the KLAS customer fingerprint is essentially a stereotype. And that word has a fairly negative connotation, but the truth is that we all stereotype on a regular basis. comes back to what we were talking about with correlation, right? We notice correlations, and I'm dying here to mention some stereotypes that I have, but I will get in some big trouble, so I'm not going to do that. But we all stereotype on a regular basis, and the reason why we do it is because it works. Because, in general, it maps to reality. And I love this. I love this internet, I don't know, picture that goes around. And the truth is that stereotypes by customer feedback work pretty well too. And we can look at your customer feedback and say, well, you're not really a developer. That probably means that you're not selling next year. You're not really doing well as far as integration goes, and that doesn't mean good things for you. Or while you do a great job as far as relationships, we would expect you to continue to do well here in the industry. And is that these stereotypes really do work. I'm gonna I'm gonna share one other thing that we can do is, and this is just sort of a side note on top of everything else. There's a lot more that we can do here with the customer fingerprint. This is Epic's fingerprint, and for Epic Inpatient EMR, as you can see, the y-axis is a lot higher than most of the fingerprints that we've shown. Customer satisfaction with Epic overall, as KLAS has measured over the last several years, and we measure a lot of customers, is very high. You can see here, delivery of new technology, delivery of new technology, supports integration goals, and executive involvement. All top-tier questions in the top 2 quadrants, and right where they need to be. What we can also, one other thing that we can do with the fingerprint is we can say, here's a product, what other products that we're measuring have a fingerprint like that? And actually these number codes here are a numerical description of the fingerprint, and we can match this up to all the other products in our database, and sort of like a barcode, if you will. And I just thought this was interesting to share. Who are some friends that look quite a bit like Epic out there? There's 3 vendors who have a very similar fingerprint. And you can really dissect and say, okay, why is it that Cerner has such a similar fingerprint? We've seen Cerner's fingerprint become a lot more like Epic over the past 3-4 years. As I talked about with relationships and with some of their development. They've really changed to become a lot more like Epic. Why is that? Well, that's a fingerprint, or essentially a way of delivering that really works in the industry. And in many ways, Cerner is coming to mirror that in order to also be successful in this industry. Highland, who is a close partner of Epic, well, that's interesting. A good majority of Epic installs have Highland there as their document management system, and it's interesting that Highland would turn out in their customer feedback looking a lot like Epic. NextGen, this is not a product that you would expect to look like Epic. But the truth is, if you start looking at it, NextGen performs at a lower level in the customer's eyes, so on average has lower satisfaction. But the product itself is fairly similar. Big and bulky, often looked at as the Cadillac. Really tough to get in, but once you get it in, it works really well for customers over the long run. There's a number of similarities. I didn't share any is we match up one product's fingerprint to other products in the industry. Sometimes it's interesting as we match up the fingerprint, and then we see a number of products that are sunsetted, they're going out of business, and that's an indication of, wow, you do not have a strong fingerprint. At the end of the day, we hope that this is helpful for you. As we mentioned at the beginning of today's webinar, we're still trying to understand how this could be helpful for investment firms, how much energy we want to put into this, and if this is something that matters to you or not. So we would love and appreciate your feedback about today's presentation. Anyway, if there's no other questions, we can wait here for a minute and see if there's any questions. One question is, can the fingerprint also map to an entire market segment? That's a great question. We have looked at that before, and yes, it can. So let me give you an example of that. In the PACS market segment, if you conglomerate the fingerprint across all different products, delivery of new technology is very much in the bottom right-hand quadrant. that really maps quite well. There are very few vendors right now today in the PAX market who are really innovating or developing anything new as far as we can tell. And PAX is becoming more and more of a commodity without that innovation. So can that fingerprint sort of shed light onto the market as a whole, and what are some possible deficiencies in the market? In essence, I would say that the PAX market is ready for someone to do something innovative and to kind of change the rules in that market. And I think that there's several things that current players could do but are not. And so yeah, the fingerprint of a market segment can shed some insight as to where is the market as a whole.
Taylor, this is Doug, is there also some value in comparing an individual vendor to the fingerprint of the market segment? In other words, this vendor to how everybody else in the segment looks. Is there value to that? I wonder if that's part of the question as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of value there. You can do it to the entire rest of the market segment. Generally, that type of a question is something that we'd rather do surgery on, rather than hit it with a pretty blunt object and just look at it, the market segment as a whole. Every market is composed of different players, and so yeah, what you're looking for there is a fingerprint that's offering something different than what everyone else is offering in the market. You're looking for different strengths in a different but successful fingerprint, and you can kind of spot someone who's going to be stand out. Another question here, can you see what's the fingerprint for Meditech version 6 and how does that fit into your framework? Great question. Meditech version 6 has a very different fingerprint than the Meditech client server version 5.6 and before. Let me give you one example of it, although I think that there's a lot more here than necessarily I can cover today. Money's worth is the most important question and one of the highest rated questions for Meditech CS customers who are not version 6 customers. Meditech has historically been looked at as the CFO solution out there and CFO-friendly solution. And why do you buy Meditech? Well, it's pretty easy on our pocketbook, and it's good enough quality, but it's pretty easy on our pocketbook. We bought it for price. If you look at the version 6 fingerprint, money's worth is clear over to the left. And there's a good number of questions that are down in the bottom right-hand quadrant, including quality of implementation, overall product quality. There's a lot there indicating that in some ways it's still a developing product, but there's some sickness with that product, if you will, and there's some real problems with that product. And the fact that it's cheap is sort of not even a focus for customers right now because they're dealing with some of these other problems. I just went on site to a Meditech version 6 customer who actually told me that exact same story. So you can look at the fingerprint and you can see it there. I went on site with a customer who said, you know, we always bought them because it was well priced, and the truth is that we feel like our hospital is on fire right now. They're probably one of the most unhappy customers that we're speaking to, but just a good example of yeah, the price tag is really not even an issue for us anymore, or a positive for us anymore, because these issues have been so significant. Great question. We're not seeing any other questions coming across. We appreciate your participation, and feel free to reach out to us personally. Many of you have Doug's contact information. Anyway, we appreciate your participation today. Thank you so much.